Hey Jay, how on earth are you managing to stomach BfA era WoW?
Well, it's a matter of perspective.
This is MultimediaJay radio style for Sunday, August 18th, 2019. Let's start the show.
MultimediaJay radio style.
Well, for those of you who've been listening to these discussions that wanted me to put my money where my mouth was and not make fun of a game that I hadn't played in years, you should be very happy now, because I actually tried to play some WoW this evening. Legion content, of course. After however many years it's been, I finally completed the assault on the Broken Shore, so I've got Broken Shore world quests available. Ooh. And I imagine I should probably play through and unlock Argus at some point later on as well. I'll see how to do that to catch up on the story of Legion. Yes, I'm still playing through Legion content, and it's interesting to run around the order halls and stuff and see other characters that are still 110s. So I know I'm not the only one who's come back to the game and is just messing around in Legion until Classic launches. However, if I want to pick up BfA at a discounted rate, I just found out today about Amazon having, through one of their 3PLs or one of their third-party distributors, Amazon has box copies of Battle for Azeroth on sale for 30-something, plus about 4 shipping. So I'm keeping an eye on Blizzard right now, because I'm very curious if Blizzard's going to have some kind of BfA sale when Classic launches. So, hey, you came back for Classic, check it out. Now why don't you upgrade your account and check out BfA or something like that. If they line up the right kind of patch content for when Classic launches, and it's a little more interesting than vanilla BfA was, so to speak, I imagine they could probably sell some units that way, despite all the nonsense that's going on with Blizzard in the last year and a half. However, I'm just gonna wait and see at this point to see if there is some kind of sale on BfA that can beat this offer for this box copy, because if I caved and went with this box copy to not pay full retail for BfA, it would be probably the weirdest reason in the world why I ever bought a box copy of a video game. And what's more interesting is that I know with how Blizzard does things nowadays, that so-called box copies are just collector items. They're not really boxed versions of the game with CDs anymore. They'll just have a thing with a code inside of them. I saw this coming when Skyrim required me to set up a Steam account back in the day, and at the time, if 2011 counts, and at the time I was like, I don't want Steam, I just want to play Skyrim. Why do I have to play this on Steam? It's stupid, it's DRM, it's horrible. Well, fast forward a few years, and I've become a Steam fan. I have Steam, GOG, I have EA Origin, and yeah, definitely a PC gamer in today's account-based world. Now, I don't know if some recent maintenance fixed some of the disconnect issues that I was having when I was lampooning BfA after coming back to the game, but or maybe it's just that thing I've heard where your client communicates with the server and the connection kind of evens out as the client and the server get used to talking to each other. I mean, I've seen similar stuff with Final Fantasy XIV. Oftentimes, usually after a server transfer, the game would report that my connection was poor, and then after a break-in period, it would start saying the connection was excellent. So it's probably some code thing or something like that going on behind the scenes. All right. So the question is, with regards to coming back from years of ESO, Guild Wars 2, etc., how am I able to stomach the BfA era in WoW? And the answer is with proper perspective. And that's why we're here today to talk about proper perspective, even though, just for the heck of it, I took a picture of Lady Lockhart outside the entrance to the Dead Mines for today's picture of the day to go along with this podcast. But this will all tie together when we get into talking about why I want to talk about perspective in the first place. As I've tried to play WoW again with my Paladin, usually protection spec, going through the Order Hall campaign and stuff along those lines, as I've gotten back into the swing of things, since leaving at the in early Legion for non-antagonistic reasons. May I remind you once again, I left because I was curious about ESO 1 Tamriel. All of this stuff that people have gotten angry about when it comes to WoW, all the Blizzy knows best stuff that has been ticking off all these commentators, since I left, that all happened afterwards. So stomaching the BfA version of this game is really a matter of perspective, or in my case, how much my perspective has changed now that we live in a world where World of Warcraft finally has viable competition, so Blizzard can't just do anything anymore. At least that's the way that it should work. If you have people out there who only play WoW, only want to play WoW, and thus are gaslit by their complete laser focus on World of Warcraft, unless you have people that are basically pandering to Blizzard's fantasies of being #1 MMO forever, like it's the good old days, or whatever it gets passed around in those halls at that company. Unless somebody's caught up in that stuff, you will have a different perspective. I take the criticism of BfA as evidence that people are smartening up, and they're realizing that there is a whole wide world out there, even with just MMOs, beyond this game. So if Blizzard wants to half-cook stuff and say, check out this new feature, this is good, people can very quickly and very easily see that that's not the case. And I actually made a list of Blizzard half-assery through the years. Here's some examples. Recently we talked about the world scaling not being as good as it could be. ESO and Guild Wars 2 both handle it better. The reason why we're having this discussion today is because recently on the 825 PTRs, there's been this buzz about this wonderful new feature that's being introduced called Party Sync. So if you have, it sounds like a great idea if you only play World of Warcraft. If you've seen the world beyond Blizzy Knows Best land, then you'll know that this, not only is it not a wild and crazy awesome new idea, it's something that wouldn't have to exist if Blizzard hadn't made the design decisions that they made. So the world scaling. This feeds into the ongoing problem that Blizzard has with WoW, where this big world, which is a third of the name of the game here, World of Warcraft, doesn't actually get bigger as you progress and become more powerful, much like in other games. It actually gets smaller. And the reason why it gets smaller is because content becomes irrelevant the further you progress. And this was not addressed with the scaling system. It was band-aided a bit to where content sometimes competes with each other in a way that doesn't make any sense, like the aforementioned pitting Burning Crusade against Lich King or Cataclysm versus Mists of Pandaria. But the unfortunate truth of the matter is that the so-called expansion packs in World of Warcraft are more like replacement packs, because everything that you've unlocked up to that point becomes old, and only the current stuff matters. And with BfA, you have a grand total of, well, now the Ashara stuff is out, finally there's more than just the island where Jaina Proudmoore is from and where the Zandalari trolls are from. I mean, imagine a day and age where that's your content, just a set of islands. No, that's it. In the entire world with everything going on, the only thing that's going to give you any decent challenge is that small section of the world. That's probably the most extreme example of this that I've seen as of yet. Even Legion did better with the Broken Isles. You know, Warlords of Draenor, as much as it was nearly a patchless expansion, at least gave you the continent of Draenor. BfA gives you, depending on your faction, one place but not the other, or something like that. But that's just a symptom. It's not the problem. The problem is that other games are out there nowadays where the world will get bigger as you progress. And it's the older, more dated games that have parts of the world become obsolete and irrelevant. For those of you unfamiliar with the whole party sync thing that's getting all the buzz, if you are in a group with some folks, it's basically Final Fantasy XIV's sync button brought over to World of Warcraft. If you are in a party, the levels and everything and what you can queue for, you get down leveled to the level range of the content that your lowest level friend is on. and you can queue for dungeons or do quests in the outdoor world. Now, there are some good things to this party sync thing that's going on, and that is if you're in a phased area, the phasing resets to your buddies, where your buddy is in the quests. There's a quest replay feature being worked on to where you can help somebody through a quest once, in addition to completing it yourself. But the big issue I have is with the downscaling, because now we have a second form of downscaling in addition to time walking, and this time, much like in Final Fantasy XIV, you're losing skills. So, it could be the case, as the Final Fantasy folks have tried to figure out with their system over an expansion or two's worth of content, as Final Fantasy has tried to iron this out, now you have a world in World of Warcraft where you can help your buddy out, but you'll have to redo your action bars because of disabled skills from going down to their level. Just thinking about this on my own, I could come up with a better system than this. The way I would have done Party Sync is it would run off of the same technology as time walking, so your abilities and everything would get scaled down, so there would be a sense of progression that you were a mentor who had more power than the player at that level right now, and you wouldn't have to redo your bars to help your buddy out. But what I would do is for phasing and level scaling and stuff, I would just attach that to the party lead feature. So, if you wanted to help a low-level buddy out, and this makes sense because they're the ones calling the shots, you're just helping them, you'd invite them to a party and you'd pass lead to them, so to speak. Whoever the party lead was is what everything's based on. But in this wonderful day and age of Blizzy Knows Best, where Blizzard's previous design choices necessitate the use of workarounds, or band-aids for problems introduced by the previous design choices, these kinds of features can get lauded and paraded about as wonderful new features in this game. Check it out. You can help your buddy now. Yeah, except something like Party Sync is not necessary in Guild Wars 2 or ESO. In ESO, everything levels with you. So to go back into old content to help one of your friends out, you just go there and party up with them and do stuff. In Guild Wars 2, same thing. Go there, party up with someone, and do stuff. You'll just get your level dropped, whereas in ESO, everything levels with you, similar to kinda sorta what WoW started doing in Legion. But this isn't the only example of this that Blizzard has done over the years. I actually made a list, and I'm going to keep this around, as this is one of those things I should keep bringing up over and over again, until folks start to understand, oh, that's what he's talking about. Yeah, he's got a point. The potion system in the original game was weak, as was the first aid system, necessitating the existence of dedicated healers, whereas in previous games they were a quality of life thing. There were ways for parties in games like Neverwinter Nights and whatnot to get through the game, to get through whatever challenge, I should say, that they were doing in the game without needing a dedicated healer, but a dedicated healer would basically mean that they wouldn't have to buy all kinds of potions and bandages and stuff. There'd be a lot less consumables and supplies to buy if you found a dedicated healer to join your party. So healers were still appreciated, but they weren't blamed for everything going wrong because they weren't really necessary. If there was a way for you to take care of yourself and not rely on the healer for everything, then you had no excuse if you didn't take care of yourself. As opposed to all the baggage the MMO Trinity has brought to the table in the last 15 years and whatnot. Another element, too, is all this influence from EverQuest in the earlier years of the game before World of Warcraft started taking on an identity of its own. I mean, again, Blizzard didn't go far enough. They half-cooked something. They didn't come up with original ideas in the beginning. They just filled the world with Kill 10 Boars type quests and other sorts of stuff with only occasional examples of somewhat original ideas. But the rest was kind of based on the MMOs that came before it. It wasn't until the game started getting into its stride that it started setting standards like being able to solo to max level and all specs being viable in raid situations. Flight points. We had this discussion in the whole Flightgate of Draenor debacle when there was the big argument about flying in Warlords. They're a half-cooked version of the fast travel systems like the Way Shrines in ESO, or the fast travel pay-as-you-go system in Guild Wars 2, and stuff like that. So, but it's nice to be able to hop on a Flightmaster Griffin or whatever and fly around and get a nice scenic flight the first time, but when it's the umpteenth time and you don't have a flying mount, that's when it starts to feel like time gating. And in Warlords of Draenor, of course, there was the whole argument about flying, and Blizzard was like, well, the Flightmasters are going to be the most direct and fastest way to get around it that we have. And then, of course, there was the Flightmaster's whistle in Legion, and yeah, it was all because of their decision to have flight points as opposed to a fast travel way shrine or carriage system or ship system like in other RPGs out there. So Blizzard, trying to be clever, came up with something that was worse, but it was considered a feature. Flying is itself in WoW is just adding a Z-axis to the mounts. We talked about this in some previous discussions, some of which I've taken down, but I'm thinking of bringing back, as well as explaining the context behind them at the time. Kind of like what I used to do with the retro reel. But one of the shortcomings of World of Warcraft's flying mounts is that they just add an up-down Z-axis to the mounts. They go up in the air. And there really isn't much in terms of development of the game's response to threats from the air, leading to the problems of, well, if you have a flying mount too early, you can just fly over the content and eliminate the challenge. And we don't want to put super cannons everywhere. So, beginning with Warlords of Draenor, there were arguments about flying and attempts to bypass the flight restrictions, like that wing trinket or whatever it was that shot you up in the air and then you slow-falled until you hit the ground. People were using that to bypass content. I also used the Shredder in Gorgron to fly temporarily and basically used it like a flying mount. So, basically use it like a flying mount for Gorgron quests and stuff. Also, let's not forget, despite being a successful MMORPG, World of Warcraft clings very tightly to its RTS real-time strategy roots, and RTS units are known for being strong against one other kind of unit and weak against another kind of unit. And this kind of design choice has made it into things like the never-ending fights over skills, class balance, who needs to be nerfed, things along those lines, and this is all just stuff that Blizzard decided to try and be clever on, try to reinvent the wheel, but the results just created problems that now they have these workaround features that they can now say are wonderful new features in the game that are really just solving problems that they themselves created. Take time walking, for example. Why does time walking need to exist? If everything's scaled properly and you could go back to old content the right way, why does it need to be a special feature? Why do there need to be time walking events? Why can't you just queue up for whatever whenever and have it be somewhat of a challenge instead of a total pushover? Why does this need to exist? That's the thing. If all you care about is World of Warcraft and you are fishbowled by Blizzard, they can give you crap and you'll think it's good. But once you get a better perspective, like what other games are doing now that this game finally has some viable competition, things change a lot. And that's really the way I've been able to stomach BfA era WoW since coming back to it for Classic. First, perspective. I know I'm not the only one doing this because I see 110s still running around in the order halls in the major cities. The order hall ones matter more, of course, because why would you be running around doing your order hall campaign at level 110 if you were leveling in BfA? You should be heading off to the BfA content with the boost. If you took the 110 boost and stuff like that, that's what they're there for. I mean, why would you go back and do the old content, so to speak? But it's perspective. Same thing too. I mean, I play WoW and it's a cartoon. It's a game that is dated, looks like an old game, feels like an old game, and it's going to have features that aren't as good as the games I've been playing for the last couple of years, some of which is due to Blizzy knows best, the company's hubris and the narcissism they exhibit, all that remaining whatever from their heyday as the most successful subscription MMO ever. Now, there's nothing I can really do about who Blizzard decides to put in charge. There can be all the ramblings and whatever on the internet about, haha, Bobby Boy is ruining everything, haha, Activision's ruining Blizzard, haha, this is really a lousy game nowadays because of all these corporate interests. Yeah, well, the big thing I can do these days is play other stuff. And that's what I've been doing. And that's what I have no qualms with doing again, if Classic turns out to be not as interesting as I thought it would be. Of course, it would be nice just to say, I did play that stuff when it came out. And if BfA's on sale, I might check out the BfA content then, but not before I deal with the Legion content that was left on the table last go-round. Legion nowadays is known as a good expansion. So I definitely want to spend some time at 110 before pushing the button on BfA content, if I even bother with it in the first place. I also have work to do in Elder Scrolls Online with the Elsewhere expansion, which by the way is going to get new areas with some of the major updates to the Season of the Dragon storyline that's going on. So that's going to be going on. I still want to 100% complete all of what's available in Tamriel, including the DLCs, which I've been struggling with. I keep bouncing between the main map and the DLC areas. So I've got Orsinium done, but I still haven't done a lot of the areas in the Aldmeri Dominion and the Ebonheart Pact. So I've got all this stuff to do in ESO, all these stories to see, fully voiced, all these zones to change, alts to level, builds to try out. And that's not even talking about the content that I have waiting for me in Guild Wars 2 that I log into every so often to get the Living World updates. And then I haven't even touched Final Fantasy Shadowbringers. So there is plenty for me to do out there in the MMO world, not even talking about other games that I could be playing that aren't MMOs. Forza, the Lego expansion pack that just came out. Haven't done anything with it. Haven't even bought it. There's so much to do. If Blizzard wants to engage in shenanigans, I have options. Options that didn't exist a couple of years ago. Compelling alternatives to this game, so I don't have to have the love-hate relationship that I've had with this game in some of its duller expansions like Warlords of Draenor. Times change, and in my case, and as should be the case with lots of other gamers out there, perspectives change as well. And that's really the best way to cope with any shenanigans that Blizzard may still have up their sleeve, as well as their nasty reputation for this yin-yang feast or famine cycle with these expansion packs. One's good, the other's rubbish. Then the next one's good, then the other's rubbish. The merry-go-round over and over and over again of this expansion was good, and this expansion disappointed the heck out of me. Step off the merry-go-round, folks. We don't have to put up with this stuff anymore. I hope this can be of use to someone out there. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay signing off. Thanks for stopping by.